We've got a ton of PC hardware news to talk about today. Let's start with the AMD graphics cards that seem to be dropping in price. We see the 7700 XT dropping to $349 for the first time, including a 2-game bundle. That includes Space Marine 2 as well as Unknown 9 Awakening. Now, I haven't played those yet. I know Space Marine 2 has been getting a lot of positive reviews and user reviews, word of mouth, and all of that. So that's starting to look pretty attractive at that price point. The 7900 XT also dropping to $649. It's been there before, but had gone back up. Last time it hit this price, I was starting to say, okay, that's starting to get to where it's kind of interesting. And even the flagship AMD 7900 XTX is dropping below $870, which again, the further it separates itself from the 4080 Super pricing and closer to 4070 Ti Super pricing, the more attractive the 7900 XTX looks in comparison. Now, all of this is probably designed to kind of clear stock before they get their RDNA 4 stuff out there, which the latest rumors are showing kind of the beginning of next year as likely being when we'll see that. But these price cuts also highlight something that PC Gamer is mentioning, which is if AMD is so interested in a solution to their collapsing GPU market share, why don't they try these lower prices from launch? Meaning, what if the 7700 XT had launched at $350? Because recently I did a video talking about is buying AMD dumb, and we looked at different price points, and I highlighted that at current pricing, the 7700 XT can make a lot of sense. But it could have been a mistake if you had bought it at a higher price, right? AMD really has to get the pricing and feature set right for it not to be a mistake for your PC build. But it can be a good value, but what if they missed out on those good launch reviews? Speaking of making mistakes on your PC build, so many people make a huge mistake when upgrading their gaming PC setup, and that's not thinking enough about the chair they will be sitting in the entire time they're using it for work and gaming. And this can lead to severe lower back pain. I mean, you probably don't need me to tell you that. You've, I'm sure, experienced this for yourself, especially if you've been using one of those terrible gaming chairs that are just scamming people. But anyway, that's a whole other note. What you really need is an ergonomic office chair that can adapt to your body to give you the support that you need. My latest chair upgrade has been the HBADA E3 Ergonomic Office Chair, which has a T-shaped support system, which has really helped relieve my lower back pain. It has a 3-zone floating wing lumbar support, which really adjusts to fit my body, and I've had other people sit in the chair that are bigger or smaller than me, and it's fit them great as well. Also has a 4D double axis neck pillow where you can get it just right for that neck support, and it has a 6D mechanical armrest. Honestly, I have never seen a chair with this much adjustability to make it fit me, and it even has a footrest that can pop out when you want to kick back and relax while playing some games, maybe with a controller, maybe even want to take a nap in the chair. But again, I can get that head support and back support I want when I'm sitting up straight for more competitive gaming session type of use. And I also love a mesh chair. Again, if you've been in an office chair where you're feeling hot, sticky, sweaty, gross after sitting in it for a while, you need a mesh chair that is breathable. The HBADA Ergonomic Office Chair has all of these things, so huge thank you for them for sending it over and sponsoring today's video. And you guys should follow the link in the video description and or pinned comment and check it out for yourself. Your lower back will thank you. All right, now that you guys know which chair to buy for your PC build, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about this AMD price drops and versus what do they need to do with RDNA 4 for it to work well? Right, so think about cards like the 7700 XT. This thing came out at $450. It didn't make sense even against AMD's own lineup, where the 7800 XT was coming in at $500, offering more VRAM and a lot more performance. And now the 7700 XT is finally getting to a price point where it makes a lot of sense. What if it had launched at this price up against the 4060 Ti 8GB at $400, where you have tons more VRAM, a much lower price, and more performance? It's more attractive there, right? The 7900 XT recently dropping to $649. Do you guys remember that this card came out at $900? The original MSRP of the 7900 XT was $900, where again, it didn't even make sense against AMD's own product stack, where the 7900 XTX flagship came in at $1,000. It was only $100 $100 difference. If we're talking a 10% price difference, they were more than 10% apart, meaning the higher end product was actually offering a better value, and that's against AMD's own product stack, let alone trying to convince people to buy it up against Nvidia. And so that's where we run into these issues, where AMD's, a lot of time, their launch pricing does not make any sense. So in that sense, I really do definitely agree with this article from PC Gamer talking about that AMD needs to get their pricing correct at launch. Because a lot of people, if you're like, okay, I see 7700 XTs are in my price range, so now you look up reviews, right? But if the review that you look up, because you're not somebody who follows PC gaming on a day-to-day basis when you're not planning on buying a PC, you're somebody who just jumps into it when you're looking at buying a PC. Okay, should I buy a 7700 XT? I'm gonna Google the review for it. And now you see a whole bunch of negative launch day reviews, even though the price makes a lot more sense now. If the reviews were negative because the initial price didn't make sense, then you might go ahead and not buy it because you're seeing those negative reviews that are still online despite the fact that the pricing situation has changed. So the strategy of launching at as high a price as possible and then reducing it later could very well be damaging their overall product launch even after the pricing corrects. Now, we really haven't seen what it would be like if AMD got it right from launch, so we don't know if that would completely solve the problem, but I certainly think it's at least part of the problem, and I would agree with that. But I'm not sure it's the simple solution that would solve all of the problems, because again, as I talked about in my last video about buying AMD GPUs, again, I do think a lot of times they make a lot of sense for the price, but you also do need to consider your use case and the feature set. I think it would really help if AMD could reach at least parity with the quality and feature set of Nvidia GPUs across the board, and it would be even better if they could have some exclusive features, because a lot of where Nvidia's driving that market share is that fear of missing out. I think that's a big deal for people, is like, oh, if I don't buy Nvidia, I'll be missing out on that feature, whatever that feature is. Nvidia's always done this. Do you guys remember when it was like Hairworks and when it was... anyway, you guys, PhysX and all that, right? They're big on that, selling you on that fear of missing out if you don't buy their branding. So one place where AMD is actually kind of doing that is with their driver level frame generation. This is a place where they're offering something Nvidia isn't, at least currently, and they've just released the official version of AFMF2. This is the driver level frame generation. So to be clear here, this is not FSR 3 or 3.1. This is not like DLSS 3 frame generation. Those technologies need to be built into a game, and that involves a game developer going through some kind of effort to do that, which in a lot of older games or even in some newer games, they're not necessarily going to put through that developer time in order to implement. Now, if frame generation is built directly into a game, it has access to more information about the frames to get a higher quality frame interpolation, and thus it's better if it's built directly into the game. But AMD does offer a driver level frame generation that does allow you to do frame generation on virtually any game, although the quality of the frame generation isn't as good as when it's, I'll move out of the way here, as when it's directly integrated in the game, because again, it just has access to less information. That being said, they've improved AFMF to AFMF2 now. There's been preview drivers available for this for a long time, but we are now onto the official release of this. Also, this official release offers some new game support. AFMF2 compared to AFMF1 is claiming lower latency and higher performance, as well as fast motion optimization, improved borderless full screen support, expanded API support, Radeon Shield interoperability, so they're no longer incompatible with each other, and optimized for Ryzen AI 300 series support. So that's really cool. And now I've talked about all of this when I talked about the preview drivers, and I haven't actually gone through full testing of this to give you really any more of my hands-on information about that. But I will say that a lot of people, you know, anecdotally online, there we go, seem to be having a good experience with this. I looked to see if there was much testing available on this, as well as just for this driver in general with this game support list. Because notice here, new game support in this driver, like God of War Ragnarok 2. I'm highlighting that one because when you saw like Hardware Unboxed, for example, did a big multiple GPU test in God of War Ragnarok, AMD GPUs were significantly underperforming relative to Nvidia at launch. However, it looks like this driver support, which came out a bit after that, is offering the official support for Ragnarok, so I'm hopeful that that will have improved their standing relative to Nvidia. I went looking for information on this, and we have Ancient Gameplays, who has a video just a couple of days ago taking a look at these drivers. And he actually did do at least some limited testing of God of War Ragnarok between the two driver versions, which is cool to see. And it is showing increased performance versus the older driver version. And he also mentions some improved frame pacing, which is really good. So it does look like this is a better driver update. And in general, by the way, Ancient Gameplays seems to be the place to go if you're interested in the latest AMD driver updates and thorough testing and information about those, as well as if they're improving stability or if they have any kinds of issues, should you wait, that type of thing. So anyway, by the way, all my sources will be included in the video description, so definitely go ahead and take a look at those. Because again, AMD drivers have been a talking point. Generally, the consensus online is AMD drivers are in a much, much, much better place now than they were a number of years ago. But there's still debate on if they're still as good as Nvidia drivers, as stable. My personal experience is my personal experience. I'm a sample size of 1, so even though I have a lot of GPUs, it's like the amount of time I can put into those and the amount of PCs, compatibility issues you might run into with different hardware configurations. I don't have stability issues with virtually any of my GPUs, and the occasional weird thing happens to me with both AMD and Nvidia. But I don't really have any major issues to report on, so that's still something that's kind of like, I don't know how to get accurate data on the exact situation, like with hard numbers on driver support and compatibility and crashes and whatnot between GPU vendors. However, it looks like AMD is making yet another move to improve their drivers further by opening their driver experiments to game developers. In other words, they are giving more access to tools within their driver to game developers if they choose to use them. I think this could only be a good thing, because if game developers don't want to use this, then they can just do what they've always been doing. And if they do want to use this, then perhaps it will result in games that are better optimized at launch without having to have had AMD do that themselves, if that makes sense. For example, like I was saying, with the God of War Ragnarok issue, perhaps the game could have just shipped in a better state had the developers had more access to tools. I don't know exactly on that. I'm just kind of saying like that's an example of the kind of thing we might look at. I'm not going to go into the details of every little thing here that they're opening up access to, but I'll kind of scroll through it here a little bit. Again, there's links to the video description to all of the sources I'm looking at here if you want to look at it a bit more closely. Another place where I think, again, AMD could improve their support is in productivity apps, AI apps, things like that, where a lot of times the developers are focusing on CUDA when they write their programming, because NVIDIA has a much larger market share. One place that we had seen an interesting development in that earlier was with an open source library called ZLUDA, which had looked at, I think, translating the CUDA programming to then run and be compatible and work well on other hardware like AMD. Now then, ZLUDA had got shut down, apparently at the request of AMD, which was interesting. Maybe they were fearing some kind of legal pushback from NVIDIA. However, it looks like the developers are back up and running on ZLUDA, back to whatever fork at which they could work from that AMD couldn't influence them on, and are making another big push here for both multi-GPU compatibility as well as AI workloads. However, as far as when does this actually fully get support going, it's looking like it might not be available until sometime next year. It doesn't look like, again, it says the developer, Janik, claims that it will take around a year before the library comes back in shape. So there was a big setback there, but it's looking like it is getting up and going again. And again, it's looking like there's a big focus on AI tools that are programmed around CUDA, running using this library to then work well on AMD hardware. So again, all these little things, I think, plus all the things that Jack Quinn has been saying about AMD is targeting like AI upscaling and really looking for that big push of market share, trying to get a lot of developer support and everything like that. It feels like AMD may have the right idea with where they want to go to try to capture some more market share back and be competitive with Nvidia. But we will still have to see what comes of that, especially will any of that hit in time for their next generation. Speaking of next generation products, we're getting a little bit more information about the 50 series from Nvidia. It's looking like the RTX 4080 Super GPU supply will be being phased out in November, meaning that new models will no longer be being shipped off, chips will no longer be shipped off to AIB vendors to then make their cards and sell those. So now some of that will already be in channels and take a while to get out of there. But I think the idea here is to get that done before the 5090 and 5080 launch, which again, it's looking like Q1 of next year, probably towards the beginning of the year, but we still don't have official information on that. And the latest rumor is that the 5080 and 5090 will be launching simultaneously rather than one staggered after the other. But again, none of that is official at this point. Now, I've done a video talking about how the 5080 looks to be incredibly cut down compared to the 5090. We're talking like half the cores, half the memory bandwidth. Like it's massive if you believe the latest leaks and rumors, because again, none of it's official. And that's a bit concerning. Also, a lot of people were upset by the fact that it looked like the 5080 would only be a 16 gigabyte graphics card. I do have a bit more information about that, but again, we're still in leaks and rumors territory, where there's a lot of rumors now of a 24 gigabyte 5080 will eventually come out, but it's not going to be the launch model. Now, whether that would be called a 5080 Super or a 5080 Ti or something like that, I mean, if there's a massive gap between the 5090 and the 5080, that does leave a huge window for another card to slot in between those, right? And so if they offered a 24 gigabyte 5080 to kind of slot in between, that could potentially be interesting for people who don't want that 16 gigabyte card. But again, all signs point to that not being available at launch, and this is all still leaks and rumors. It's also unclear whether that would be also increased gaming performance, like more cores, like would it be a cut down 5090 instead of just a 5080 with more VRAM? Now, could you even do a 5080 with more VRAM and not change the underlying specs? Well, that's the interesting thing about the GDDR7, because there are signs that GDDR7 could be available in 3 gigabyte VRAM modules. So if you slotted 3 gigabytes of VRAM into the same slot that 2 gigabytes of VRAM is normally slotted into, then your 16 gigabyte card magically becomes a 24 gigabyte card. But that depends on the availability of those 3 gigabyte modules, and maybe those aren't even available at time of the initial launch for the 5080, which could impact why that couldn't be available at launch. Because again, you only get so many slots based on how many bits you have in your memory bus to slot in VRAM modules. That's why there's kind of set limits on what VRAM configurations make sense for a given GPU. Anyway, it would certainly be nice to have 24 gigabytes on a 5080, even if in the vast majority of situations, 16 gigabytes doesn't show any signs of being an issue. But vast majority isn't the same as none, and also depending on how long you continue to use the GPU, VRAM usage in games tends to go up. Do you want to mod games, etc. Anyway, let's move on to it. Apparently, Intel is claiming that their stability issues are over for people who haven't already developed them. In other words, we've had the whole ongoing saga of Intel 13th and 14th gen CPU stability issues, especially on the high-end chips. I've reported on this massively in the past, so I don't want to dig up all of those details. But basically, with NVIDIA's recent microcode update being, I think, their fourth one to address issues here, or at least their fourth attempt to address these issues, Intel is now on quote with The Verge for saying specifically, this is specific quote from Intel to The Verge, yes, we are confirming this is the cause and that it is fixed. So they're saying that the vmin shift that has been targeted by the last two microcode updates was the underlying root cause and that they have fixed it with these microcode updates. Now, that's if you take Intel's word for it, which I'll leave it up to you how much you want to trust them on that, but they are flat out saying that that was the root cause and they have fixed it. However, it's also extremely important to remember that this does not fix processors that have already had issues. Again, and that's directly from Intel, because I've seen a lot of people misunderstanding this. If your CPU has already had damage, it is not fixed by these updates. And this is from Intel. Quote, to be clear, the BIOS and microcode updates will not fix processors that already are experiencing instability from vmin shift. So in other words, all these microcode updates do is, let's say you have a new chip or a chip that had not already degraded, these microcode updates, Intel promises, are going to solve the problem, meaning you will not develop the problem. But if your chip already has a problem, then this does not solve it, okay? So just want to be 100% clear on that. And the article also highlights that Intel has not given any sort of tool to allow you to identify if your CPU has already aged prematurely. And they also have not given any estimate of how many chips are likely to be irreversibly impacted, how lenient it will be with warranty support, or any kind of batch or serial number range for chips that have been affected by this, or oxidation issues. Sorry, that's for the oxidation issues. The point is, hopefully Intel really has actually solved this problem as they're stating. But again, a lot of people's stuff is already damaged. And again, the history here is that they've had a variety of issues that they have now solved. Motherboard power delivery settings exceeding Intel power guidance was the first thing that they targeted. The next thing that they targeted was, I don't know, does this article not list them all out? So yeah, sorry. The next thing that they targeted was ETVB microcode algorithm, which was allowing Intel Core 13th and 14th Gen i9 desktop processors to operate at higher performance states, even at high temperatures, was the next thing that they solved. Then they did a microcode SVID algorithm requesting high voltages at a frequency and duration, which can cause vmin shift, which they issued a microcode update for back in August. And then this latest microcode update, they're saying, is the final mitigation. This was also targeting vmin shift, but this time during periods of idle and or light activity, as opposed to the previous one, which wasn't during the idle or light activity. So anyway, also Intel has confirmed that their future processors should not suffer these issues, but again, that's coming directly from Intel. Hopefully it's true. I know personally it will take a little while for me to be, I want to see that we aren't developing more issues on new chips using these microcode updates, and give the new generation processors a little while to be sure that things are good. Now, speaking of the new generation processors, Intel has confirmed Core Ultra 200 announcement on October 10th, and the reviews to come 2 weeks later, which would be the 24th of October. So we're getting super close to their Core Ultra 200 processors. Now, this appears to be confirmed to videocards.com unofficially. They said they have independently learned from multiple sources that Intel is now inviting media and influencers to a special pre-announcement briefing. So basically, videocards.com is saying they're pretty confident, stating that October 7th will be a non-public pre-launch press briefing with Robert Halleck and Robert Chandler to give press kind of ahead of time information about this, with October 10th being the public announcement and then October 24th being the public reviews and sales. Now, if you're wondering if you buy one of these new chips and motherboards, if you can keep using your CPU cooler from your previous generation product, we do have Arctic reaffirming that all of its LGA 1700 coolers are compatible with Intel LGA 1851 Arrow Lake CPU socket. So that's good news for that. And then if you're interested in the AMD alternative to these new chips, what about the X3D variants of AMD's Ryzen 9000? Because AMD's Ryzen 9000 non-X3D chips that we have certainly didn't light fires in the gaming performance benchmarks. So current rumors are that we'll be getting the 9800 X3D fairly soon, but then the other variants might be coming a lot later. As far as performance goes, we do now have a alleged Cinebench score for the 8-core and the 16-core, which would probably be called the 9950X3D, in Cinebench. However, the weird thing here is publishing this as a Cinebench score, because generally the X3D parts aren't Cinebench monsters, because the 3D V-cache doesn't really help you there. Generally, it's gaming workloads where that's going to be of the most benefit. So this is a bit of an odd leak to highlight 3D V-cache performance numbers. Anyway, with that being said, though, what it could do is indicate that oftentimes the 3D V-cache chips actually run at reduced clock rates, which can actually hurt their performance versus their non-3D V-cache counterparts in workloads like Cinebench. So if their Cinebench scores are good, it could actually indicate that they won't be suffering too much of a performance hit in non-gaming workloads. So you could at least maybe read it as that, but again, this is just a leak. It's just a tweet. Now, when you're evaluating tweeted performance number claims for stuff like this, leaks, the best we can usually do is go off of a source's previous track record. Now, all signs point to Code Commando as having a very short track record, but not a non-existent track record. It looks like he was able to leak the slides for the Ryzen 9000 series before AMD made them officially public, which means that it's possible he does have some sort of source that gets information about this ahead of time and then is able to publish that. If that's the case, then that could mean that these are numbers that are maybe going to show up on an AMD marketing slide that he has access to ahead of time. So it's possible that we could put some stock into these as at least being AMD's official numbers that we will maybe eventually see in a marketing slide if we're going off of, again, he had access to Ryzen 9000 series marketing slides ahead of time previously and did demonstrate that. Anyway, we'll have to see how much that's even worthwhile, because AMD famously overestimated their 9000 series CPU performance in their own marketing slides when compared to with pretty much any actual independent media testing. So even if these are the numbers that end up showing up in AMD marketing slides, does that mean they're actually accurate? Hopefully AMD has learned their lesson and has been more careful to get their marketing information accurate, because you take a big, branding hit. I guess I would say it like a hit to your reputation the more often you publish nonsense slides. So anyway, if you take this for what it is, videocards.com is reporting that it's showing the 9950X3D 10% faster in single-core performance and 17% faster in multi-core performance than the 7950X3D. And that'd be the 16-core chip, and then the 8-core chip, which I think most people would be more interested in for gaming, is actually showing 20% faster in single-core performance and 28% faster in multi-core performance than the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. Now, one thing to note is that the 7000 series scores aren't in this tweet. So videocards.com is having to source those from somewhere, which is guaranteed to not be the same test platform that these 9000 series numbers are coming from, assuming they aren't just completely made up anyway. But giving them the benefit of the doubt, these numbers aren't coming from the same test system. So we don't know what RAM speeds are being used, what kinds of performance profiles, overclocking, PBO. We don't know any of that. So I wouldn't read too much into these numbers for a wide variety of reasons. But that 20% faster in single core, 28% faster in multi-core certainly sounds very impressive. So it's possible that, if that's true, there is something cool happening with these 3D V-cache chips. And that's certainly good. We also have a WCCF Tech article that's reporting on these same things, and they're gathering their own test results here and throwing up a chart with a bunch more CPUs on there if you want to look at it when you're looking at the multi-threading performance at least. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to a bit of doom and gloom about the future of the PC hardware industry, because TSMC is just further emerging as the only leading edge foundry that really competes at the absolute highest level. And possibly because of that, or just because developing these latest cutting edge technologies is incredibly expensive and time consuming and a huge capital investment, it's looking like their 2 nanometer process will reportedly, this is coming through kind of back channel sources rather than official big statement from TSMC, getting another price hike up to $30,000 per wafer for the latest tech on the 2 nanometer and 4 nanometer. That would make 2 nanometer process twice the current cost of the 4 nanometer and 5 nanometer processes. And it's not twice as performant. So that means that we are continuing to see generational performance improvements not lining up to match the generational price increases, which, again, the wafer cost itself isn't the only thing that factors into consumer GPU and CPU prices, but it's certainly part of it. And seeing that, and that goes into the margins for companies like AMD and Nvidia. And if they're going to want to keep high margins, they're going to pass that cost off onto the consumer if they can. But again, TSMC, where else are you going to get this tech from? We're seeing Samsung's foundry customers reportedly flocking to TSMC, 3 firms moving to Taiwanese chipmaker in the latest exodus. We're seeing Samsung considering foundry division spinoff as poor 3 nanometer yields deter customers. I've already reported in other videos about all of Intel's problems with their foundries, so I'm a little pessimistic about the future of these cutting-edge generational developments. So, that's kind of where we're at. Now, throw in a few quick little stories here at the end of the video. It's looking like NVIDIA's all-in-one app, which is currently in beta, has seen some updates and will reportedly be replacing GeForce Experience entirely later this year. They're moving more and more features into the app. Now, the best thing about this app when compared to GeForce Experience is that it doesn't require a login for most of the features. I believe there's some kind of a rewards tab where if you log in and have an account, you can get some additional stuff there. But for the actual just basic updating your drivers and using your GPU feature set, you're not required to log in with an account, which is, I think, the best thing about it. It also offers some cool stuff like their RTX HDR support and things like that. And this latest version has added a few more features, including toggling G-Sync on and off through this app rather than using the NVIDIA control panel, multi-monitor support for RTX HDR, and driver rollback. So not just updating to the latest drivers, but rolling back to previous drivers, which is really handy to have within the app. It can also now notify you if there's DRM content that's playing on your computer that's stopping your shadow play recordings from working. So anyway, they're continuing to update the app, and the plan is to eventually have all of their stuff in this app, and I think deprecate their older GeForce Experience and NVIDIA control panel. We're seeing that our MSI has an RTX 4070 Ti Super Stalker 2 graphics card coming out, and it's looking like it will include the game for free. So if you're interested in that, take a look. We're also seeing Zotac offering a 4070 Super Moon Black and White series. So despite the fact that the 50 series is looming, that doesn't seem to be stopping board partners from making new 40 series designs. And we're seeing Unreal Engine 5.5 showing off a MegaLights demo, which certainly looks interesting, drastically increasing the number of shadow casting lights happening in a scene, and this demo is apparently running on a PlayStation 5. They did not say PlayStation 5 Pro, although maybe they just didn't say that, who knows. Also no information on the resolution and frame rate it's running at. And the YouTube upload here is only at 1080p, so unfortunately the quality is kind of bad just from the upload and the bitrate, so I can't give too much thoughts on the performance they're showing off here. But also, I'll just leave you with this. Do you prefer multiplayer gaming or single-player gaming? Because a lot of developers seem to be trying to target these big live service games, and then they fail. We've seen Concord and all sorts of others, and that seems to be a big target for Sony studios. And anyway, but is that really what game companies should be targeting? Although a lot of it does seem to be broken down by age range, where the youngest people seem to be preferring multiplayer gaming, and the older you get, the more likely you are to prefer single-player gaming, which is pretty interesting. So anyway, don't forget to check out a new chair for your PC build. I am certainly enjoying this one. With the HBADA Ergonomic E3 office chair. Check out that link in the video description and/or pinned comment, and I hope all of you have an excellent day.